to The Adult Table, a podcast where we sit down with people in the SASE and our STEM community. We set the virtual table to bring in a diverse set of guests to engage in a casual conversation on their professional career and life.
With this podcast, we hope that we can bridge the gap between the hierarchy involved with growing up. We can redefine what it means to be able to figuratively sit at the adult table.
I'm one of your co-hosts, Jason Chin.
And I'm your other co-host, Jenny Chung.
And for today's episode, it's going to be Jenny and I. It's been a little bit of a break for us. We just took kind of the summer off to relax, regroup ourselves, and then get into this new season, I guess you could call it. And to start off, we kind of were inspired by the SASE National Convention that happened in October. It's like kind of the hallmark professional event for the year for SASE people, and we thought that it could be a good opportunity to talk about our personal journeys in our professional world and kind of how we got there and what kind of advice that we may have or any types of questions that we have too in the industry. So
yeah, and I think after this last convention, how many conventions would you say you've been to now, Jason?
Oh God.
I guess just national, if you recall, how many years?
I've been to
regional, there's gonna be so many more.
Yeah, regional, and if you count virtual too. I kind of don't really count virtual because at that point I was a volunteer. I wasn't really going for a job. I was going there to talk to my chapters, talk to the other volunteers on my team, and reconnect in that way. But for national conventions, I've been to 4 now. And then I've been to, I think, 5 regional conferences, which is kind of wild.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the number. I think for me, it's maybe, because I didn't go this year. And then virtual, yeah, we're not going to count that. So I think maybe 4 or 5 as well. There's been quite a few of them.
Did you go to,
Dallas, Houston. I didn't go to Pittsburgh. I think that was before. What was after?
You were in Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay. But there was one Pittsburgh one before that too. There were like 2, right?
Mm-mm.
No. Oh, well, it was my freshman year. I think. I don't think you were in school yet.
Yeah, like that one. Okay.
That was like the first one that I didn't get to go to. So 3. Then what was after that? Oh, Schaumburg for 2 years. 5, and then
Pittsburgh was the
5K one. But yeah, there's been a good amount of them, and I feel like every year, well, it gets bigger and bigger, right? Also more companies at career fairs and such, and we're also in different parts of our professional career every time we go, whether we're looking for a co-op internship or just looking for just general feedback on resumes or networking, and then maybe even looking for a full-time job, right? So everyone's kind of there for different purposes, but ultimately it's to network and meet people in a professional capacity. But yeah, how was the national convention in Atlanta this year?
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience coming back to being in person for the first time in 2 years. And I think as a volunteer, those were some of the moments that I was like really looking forward to doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that even though I'm technically retired from the Northeast team, that I still got to hang out with them and still got to be there with everyone. But in terms of like the convention itself, I think there was definitely a readjustment that like SASE kind of needed to get back from virtual to like in person. So I'm kind of hoping that gets improved. I think people were still maybe hesitant with COVID, or it's interesting thinking of like the students that went to conventions beforehand, like at a typical 4-year college. If you're a freshman and you went to Pittsburgh, which is like also pretty low odds, right, as a freshman to go 2 months into college to a national convention, those people would be seniors now. So, and most seniors like don't go either. It's like a lot of those people in the middle. So there's kind of a big gap from people who were at national conventions before, and maybe it's just kind of hard to advertise an event like that when you personally don't like have that experience. But overall, I think it was nice just to kind of have everyone together. We did a lot of adult table podcast advertising over there. We got a Instagram border.
Cut out the frame thing. That was pretty good. I really like that.
Yeah, I'm really glad we got to get that together last minute. It
Hmm.
was kind of like an idea we had the week of, and
Hmm.
then I know Amberly and I were really busy during the whole convention, and then on that Saturday we're like, no, we got to do this. We're
Yeah.
gonna go to FedEx. We're gonna get this
Oh,
printed
okay.
out. First FedEx was closed, and we were
Uh-huh.
like, okay, do we give up right now? Like,
No, glad it worked out.
yeah, we got to talk to a lot of different students out there. We were just like going up to random groups. Shout out Amy, who was walking around with me too. Just like going up to people, starting conversations, just being upfront and, no shame in talking about the podcast, which is cool. So, yeah, it's cool. And if anyone saw that, if you want to know, the build up of that was super chaotic. Like we were cutting it. Oh God. We had like 10 people trying to work on that
I
poster,
think I saw
but
some pictures. Yeah.
I had a utility knife and
Uh-huh.
like scissors trying to cut through a really hard piece of cardboard.
Uh,
It looks so bad, but the end result made it there.
mhm.
It was weird too. Jenny, this is the first national conference that I went to that you weren't there.
I
Kind of
know.
like a staple of my national conferences.
Well, for those of you also who, well, you definitely know, like Jason is a role model this year. He's on the magazine. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. And I have a copy because Sweta was able to give one to me, and so it's all signed and everything. It's pretty cool.
Oh, she asked for two.
I think it's only signed by I don't know whose signature it is, but it's signed by someone. But I got a copy. It's like I was there. Yeah.
Damn, it's not the same, Jenny. No going out with you after.
I mean,
Just
next
it's
year.
just
This was
weird.
next year, and then the year after that. I think this year, the timing wise, just didn't work out as well.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think my question that I have for myself and for you too, like at what point do you think you would stop going to conventions?
I think I was talking with some of the other oldies a while ago, and we are like, "Oh, we're still gonna go to like do a conference or a convention in like 10 years, and like just be the older people that still like party and stuff." But I don't know. I think, but your role changes as you go, right? Because right now your role has been more like national volunteer and stuff like that. But in the future, it could be you representing your company, but you would still be able to go, right? And still be able to enjoy the professional track of the convention. Like you will be on the other side of the table, essentially, if your company can sponsor you to go. And I think that's kind of where I am at now, because there are people within my company that have been going to the convention, representing Northrop Grumman, because they're a pretty big presence and sponsor of the career fair and the conference itself. So I think as long as that opportunity persists, it will always be something that I will try to get sponsored by, because it's might as well, right? And also
Mhm.
we see so many familiar faces. We've kind of like grown together. Even if we all work at different companies now, we're not like affiliated in any way. Like we might all not be volunteers anymore. It's still like a nice thing to be like, oh, hey, good to catch you and like, see how you're doing. So I think I would still go. Um,
Okay.
yeah, maybe not do like all the same things, because I think at some point you would shift more away from the collegiate part of the conference. I know a lot of people are more involved in like leadership stuff, leadership part of it, where you do like trainings with all the other RCs, RMs, and stuff like that. But now the role will shift a little bit. I think that's also where my mindset for conventions in general has shifted. Even with career fairs, I have been on the other side of it, of tabling or like representing my company or just taking resumes, and it's so different. But it's like, wow, like on the other side, I don't know why I was so scared to talk to them. All the people that we talked to were probably in the same position as us when we were trying to talk to other companies as like students, right? But now they're
Mhm.
they're kind of like maybe giving the baton to the younger people to do that role instead, like the tabling and stuff.
No, that's a good point. I remembered I haven't like officially tabled for my company before.
Uh-huh.
I definitely do want to at some point,
Yeah.
but I showed up to a resume review as like a reviewer, so like I was on the flip side of that. And it was funny that I as a reviewer felt kind of those like nerves slash jitters going into it.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of put into perspective when I would like show up to any of these events where it's like
Yeah.
that person is professional, yes, they're working, they graduated college, but
Uh-huh.
they still are having this like first interaction with someone. They want to give off like a good impression,
Exactly.
whether they're trying to get a job or it's just another human being that you're just trying to have a conversation with, or like wanting to give good advice, or wanting to be as helpful as you can, and you can still have those jitters. So I don't
No,
know.
I definitely agree. I think like, and I think us saying it only means so much to people that are listening, like if they're on the younger side. But in reality, like it really, everyone is just human. Like all the interactions that you have, you think like, oh, just because they are more experienced in their work or just more, I don't know, seasoned in a higher hierarchy than you or something like that. Like if you're already working, but you're talking to like someone that's like a higher tier, it doesn't mean like the point of their going to these events too is like they want to network and talk to new people, right? So I don't
Hmm.
think that that should deter you from approaching someone new, right?
Yeah, I think one of the cool opportunities that SACE could have in the future, like you mentioned, you as a professional going in, let's say, 10 years, is that you definitely have a higher appreciation of the students or what they're doing, or care a lot more about the community than some other random professional who may show up.
Mhm.
And the like longer SACE grows, then it's cool that you're going to see more professionals who are actively involved in their campuses and like
Yeah.
might have connections or might know people. And then on the flip side, as a student coming in, I think that's like a lot easier to relate to kind of get past that first barrier of entry, right? You
Yeah.
can talk about SACE, and then also like all of us SACE people, like we're all nerds. We're all
I
like
think we're all like pretty chill too, like, welcoming and stuff like that. So, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that's the
You
whole
see how
reason
like
why we like
silly.
volunteer and start these initiatives, right? It's because
Mhm.
we want to grow the community more, and get people talking with each other and connect.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely do have a few more questions about your like tabling experience at SACE or just in general at career fairs.
Okay.
But one thing that we can kind of start off with, I know we've been doing this podcast for 2 years at this point, but maybe you could just kind of walk through your professional career, kind of how you got where you got, and then
Yeah.
I'm also really curious to know about some of your just like earliest memories of professionalism.
Mm. Well, I think that okay, yeah. I was gonna say I think our journeys are kind of similar, perhaps because we did go to the same college, and
Hmm.
I think so. Northeastern University is kind of already a really career-oriented university with its co-op programs and stuff, where it kind of forces you to start earlier in thinking about like applying for internships or jobs, and refining your resume, right? So I think the with that, um, when I first entered school, I already knew that I was gonna do at least two, three co-ops before I graduated. And so I was kind of already like in that mindset of like professionalism and then like joining SACE in my freshman year, it kind of like was more it just started right away. Like my freshman year, I was already involved in SACE with some back then there was it wasn't called SACE, it was kind of like SACE Tank, if you know what that is, kind of like pitching something, a product that you created, but it was called InnoService back in the day, sponsored by
Mm.
P&G. And it was basically a like 9 month to 1 year competition where you basically dropped up like a business plan, and ultimately you're pitching to a bunch of judges like your product based on your research that you've done. You go through multiple iterations of like your product and stuff like that. So we presented at that, and I was a freshman at the time, and it was a group effort with other SACE members. And I think that was like the first time I was like, dang, like I did this project thing like outside of my regular schoolwork, and it's something that I can put on my resume or talk about in an interview. And also, like everyone's wearing like business casual or business formal at this conference. Like I didn't know what a conference was. I was like, I didn't know what to
Mm.
expect, right? But
Yeah.
like, yeah, it was just so different from what I was used to. I've never really done a thing like that ever. And so I think because of that, like that kind of like made the trajectory of me being involved in SACE, but then also being in school and then doing two co-ops before I graduated, two 6 month co-ops, where essentially it was the same process where we had to just like interview or like apply to a bunch of jobs and interview, and then that basically applied to like how full-time job applications worked, right? It's like it was just the same thing, but just like I guess more serious because the school was helping us with like their system and making sure that you get a co-op, but now it's kind of like more you're on your own for after you graduate. So I think like from that's kind of like my mindset. What's always been professional, and I guess I'm curious to know if you felt that same way because of the school that we went to. But I think that's just like what it was.
Yeah. I don't know. I definitely came into college not really thinking about my professional life
Mm,
or work after. I think I was just like so excited to try something new and just
I see.
meet new people and
Okay.
have that classic like college experience. And
Gotcha.
I don't think I really thought about it until SACE. And I think one of the questions that I have for myself a lot of times is where I think I would have been without SACE, like at the end of college. Because yes, it's good that Northeastern is heavily on the professional side and they provide that for you. But I also kind of just relied on the fact that Northeastern was that way, that I didn't have to like
Oh, I
do
see.
as much
Okay.
for myself in the beginning. I guess that really applies to freshman year. And then once I got part of SACE, then that's kind of where my confidence grew to go to these professional events or start thinking about my resume or start thinking about networking with like real professionals. Um, but I remember actually like talking about earliest like memories of professionalism. I had gotten a job freshman year, like a side job, and it was at a candy store, but it's still a job. It was like my first
Mhm.
real job that wasn't based off of some sort of family connection, right? Like I think in high school it's kind of easy. It was like, oh, your uncle knows this person, or
Right.
I worked for my mom like for a little bit too.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't count that as like me jumping into the professional world. That was very
Right.
much like, oh, I know a few people.
Yeah.
Here's some cheap labor to go along like your high school and figure that out. But I remember I showed up to that interview. I had no idea like what my resume should look like. It must have been so bare. It must have been so ugly. It must have been so horrible. I had no idea how to dress for this interview. It was
Yeah.
like super casual, but I don't really know. I went in, I was like, oh, I could wing this. And luckily, like I got the job, but looking back, I was just so not prepared
Yeah.
for it. And I'm glad that that didn't kind of leak into my co-op experience because of SACE. Like because of SACE, now I was starting to build those things, and then that's like right before I started going on co-ops.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Do you remember what kind of questions they asked you for the interview?
I think in that time it was probably just the most generic interview questions,
Mm,
talking about like your strengths, talking about how you could work on a team and like a fast-paced environment,
right.
all that business buzzwords that
Yeah.
I'm sure you've answered or have an answer for that.
Many times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
And at that point too, I was just like, I don't know. Like like I didn't have like a story for it. I didn't like
Right. Now you know like the STAR
um
method. You know, you gotta
yeah.
tell a story, you the action and the result that you had from that. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually remember at the first national conference I went to at our in Schaumburg, I think you and Vandana were talking about that because you had a few interviews
Hmm.
at that convention. And I think that was the first time I had heard that. And I was like, oh my God, I was like, I don't have stories ready. Like, I'm not prepared for this.
Right.
But do you want to kind of explain that for the listeners of what the STAR method is? And I guess
Mhm.
kind of your thoughts on it in general, or how that maybe change your approach to
Yeah.
going into interviews.
I gotta look up what exactly it stands for. Okay, so STAR stands for situation, task, action, results. Sometimes people take out or combine the S and the T, and it's just like SAR, SAR. But I think the most common is the STAR method. And what it basically is when you're asked a question, you should explain the situation, right? That's the S part. Like give enough context so that whoever, like, they don't know you, whoever's interviewing you. So you have to set the context and be like, I was doing a group project, XYZ. This is my group members. Then you explain the task. Like, what exactly were you doing in that situation? Oh, I was completing a project with this team, right? I think this is like very bare bones example. And the action that you taken from that situation. Let's say there was a conflict on this team. One person wasn't doing the work that they were committed to. So what did you do? Right. Oh, I confronted this person. Right. Okay. Then the result, what happened because you confronted that person? Or what did you learn? Usually I combine what did you learn with the impact just because it's nice when people hear how you reflect on a situation. If it was a bad one, like confrontation is a pretty serious one, but if it was more of a smaller one, let's say like you were explaining a strength or something, you'd be like, oh, I learned to do this, or like reflect more, stuff like that. You like share the outcome essentially, which shows your character. So that's kind of what that is. And I'm sure like every company now is just star method, which is good because it's very good at storytelling. And I think people aren't, if they're new to interviewing or just new to like answering those type of questions, behavioral questions in general, then it doesn't come naturally. And so what I actually have is I have a building document that I've like consistently been building. That's just a list of bullet points of like experiences in my life, or like key milestones, like, oh, like I worked at this company, oh, I actually did this one project, conflict question mark, or like good teamwork, or like tight timeline, stuff like that, where you like categorize certain points in your life. And then when I'm preparing for an interview, I can always just like look at that list and refresh in my mind, because when I see the words, I'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, like that happens. Because obviously you can't just pull it out of your head. You might have forgotten until you read the words. So I think that's a really helpful way to like organize your thoughts. And even now, like, you know, when we do the podcast and stuff, we don't have like solid scripts, right? It's kind of like, but we have notes just to like refresh ourselves and understand the flow of like what we're trying to do. So not that to say that I've mastered it. Like, I feel like no one is perfect at storytelling or like doing behavior questions, but that's kind of how I go about it. And I think that's pretty helpful. It works for a lot of people in terms of visualizing stuff like that. So yeah, that's what it is.
Nice. Thanks, Shani. Yeah, I think even outside of interviews, it's like a pretty helpful way of getting your points across and just understanding. Yes, you're explaining something to someone who probably like doesn't know much about a situation at all, and just setting that stage. And that's definitely something that I want to work on more still, especially in the podcast, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Really making sure that these stories that we have make sense to a listener, because I know you and I have been friends for a while, and I think a lot of stuff kind of makes sense just from having those experiences or talking before or having similar progressions through college. But yeah, gotta always set the stage well. And I agree also, like I have that big notes list of like questions. I have not refreshed it in a very long time because I not have gone into an interview in a really long time. But it was always great to go back to, and it's obviously your life, it's obviously your experience, but just having those things fresh in mind are so important to getting your points across and just practicing how those stories come across too. It doesn't matter like how good of an achievement it is if you're not really pinpointing the right things or being clear in the way that you're explaining yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I guess to also add on to like the interviewing aspect of it, I know there's like different types too, like there's technical and also behavioral, but I think majority they always ask behavioral at least before they go on a technical. I haven't done a technical interview in a very long time, but the behavioral interview, I feel like usually is kind of around the same type of questions. And also depending on the industry, I feel like sometimes they just want to understand, the point of it is to understand if you're a good fit for the team itself, right? If you match, I guess, their company or like the team culture, like a buzzword, I guess, but also just to get to know you better as a person, not necessarily to see your skill level, right? In any, because they can see your experience already on your resume, but it's just to kind of like humanize it a bit, right?
Yeah. They always talk about like, oh, you're going to work with this person. You want to be able to, or you're going to talk to these people every day. Obviously, you want to be able to see yourself in that situation and see that they're a person who can communicate well, but also can connect with you too, or just not be, I don't know what the right word is. They want to just see that you could be comfortable in the work condition.
No, exactly.
I think actually it's something that you mentioned though, like good fit. Something that I found really enlightening as an employee. So I go to like our diversity and inclusion task force meetings at work, and they talk about recruiting a lot because that's kind of a major factor of being able to support communities of color. And one of the things that I never really thought about is like that idea of like being a fit for a company. But the way that they talked about it in the meeting was making sure that the people that you're interviewing can add something to the culture of the company. So
Mm,
not necessarily fitting into the similar mold that you may be looking, but finding people who can add and contribute more to that culture. And I
right.
thought that was interesting because like most people do try to fit in or try to change like how they
Yeah.
discuss certain things or try
Mhm.
to be more professional. And yes, it's good to like make sure that you could connect with them, but you should also still be able to like be yourself and be comfortable that you can add something different to that company culture that's not already there.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that's coming more with the work environment and work requirements now for people that are applying for jobs. It's more about not what the company can provide for you, but what you were like, not what how you fit into the company, but how the company fits into your life, right?
Mm,
Especially with people looking for more solely remote work now, right? They don't want to be have the commitment of working in the office, and companies should understand that and be able to provide more flexible working schedules, or even just like better benefits now too, right? Because with everything being virtual, it's changed how people look for jobs.
hmm
We've been in an environment now where we've I've worked with people that I've never met in person, and I maybe never will because they're in the East Coast, and I don't think I will be traveling to an East Coast site for work.
hmm
Um, that sort of thing. And so a lot of people are also refusing to go back to the office. And so that's why they have like implemented hybrid and that sort of thing. But that's a discussion that companies and like the hire people have to have if they want to make themselves more appealing to people to even apply for their jobs, right? And so that's a whole nother discussion too, with like how things will be in the workforce, or like how the workforce will look like in the next 5 to 10 years, because I don't think it's ever going to go back to the way it was, and no one wants it to be, which is really interesting. Yeah.
Right. And I think there are plenty of, it's kind of a 180-degree flip from the mentality before where companies would be like, oh, we could just rehire someone else.
Yeah.
For us as employees, it's kind of like, we'll just go somewhere else that has those things
Exactly.
because those are available and those
Yeah.
companies value it. And
Hmm.
if you're not going to kind of even attempt to get there is kind of like a big red flag for the workforce. And it's just like, we could find something else really easily,
That's true.
probably.
Yeah.
Um, and you have to adjust to that versus us having to adjust. So,
Yeah. And then I guess just to pivot a little bit now, but still on the professional topic of like our careers and stuff. We never really talked about it. I guess we only said like maybe our role in the company we worked at and like very in the other earlier episodes, but I think it'll be a good opportunity now for the other people to get to know kind of like what we do, and I guess even a little bit about our trajectory there. Though we have talked a little bit about that we did co-ops and stuff, but
mhm.
yeah, like Jason, what do you do? What are you,
Yeah. So,
have you been working for full time?
so I'll start with, yeah, right now what I'm doing and then kind of go through like
Yeah.
my co-ops and those experiences. So right now I am a traffic engineer two, just got that promotion
Ooh, promotion.
last week. So
Yeah.
feeling good about that. Not that like my responsibilities have changed
Mm.
really that much, but it's nice to see some recognition and some more money come in. That's really like the biggest part. But I work for this company HNTB, which is basically an engineering consulting firm. And here in like the transportation department, we'll work with different state like departments, mostly the Massachusetts Department of Transportation and some projects in the Rhode Island. So like the Rhode Island Department of Transportation. And
Hmm.
we'll work on different roadway and transportation projects around the state. So for example, if there's like a roadway project, the roadway needs to be resurfaced, the road needs to be expanded, they're trying to take out a highway for other sort of capacity needs. We'll look at basically how to get from existing to what it's looking like now, and then what our proposed idea is like how to improve that area for all users. I think that's kind of something that's been newer recently is a shift in focus in caring about pedestrians, cyclists, people who could use public transit versus traditional values of a car-centric modes of transportation. So that's kind of just like the general background. Traffic specifically, we'll look at signal, so improving signal timings. We could look at pavement markings or during construction, how we get from that existing to proposed. So like how can we keep traffic flowing while also constructing an entire project in the roadway? So it's kind of like the general basis of it. To get here, I majored in civil engineering and focused in transportation. So it's kind of like a small niche within civil engineering. And yeah, I think that co-ops were really helpful in getting there. I think there weren't that many classes specific for transportation early on as civil. And to be honest, like I did never thought I would do transportation when I first started college. I thought I'd do environmental, which is like water resources. And I remember taking a first class. I was like, I hate this so much. I'm like
No.
not doing this at all. I'm like doing horrible in this class. But the one nice thing with like co-op was that you could kind of put those interests and like test it out for 6 months. So
Yeah.
I originally started transportation, thought I didn't like it, switched to structural, really didn't like that, went back to transportation, was like, okay, this is actually something that I could see myself doing. So those co-ops are really helpful, trying something out, being in different environments, different types of companies, and trying to see the bullet point list of things that I was looking for in like a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So kind of a big spiel, but yeah, go co-op, go experiential learning.
Sure.
I always like to think about how if my first co-op was like my first full-time job, and I'd be so lost. I didn't know how to use Excel correctly, like sending emails.
Yeah.
I was a mess, and thankfully I got that first co-op, and I don't know what they were really seeing because like I don't know, my only experience was like working at that candy store that I was talking about. Like I came in with nothing, and luckily that kind of built up the foundation for me. But what about you, Jenny? I know you mentioned like you did two co-ops. Now you're at Northrop.
Yeah. So I could work like I'll do a quick timeline. So what I studied in college, I studied computer engineering. But originally I was actually electrical and computer. But even before that, I was actually undeclared. I had no major. But I kind of went the safe route of doing engineering. I only took engineering classes, even though I could have taken any, just for like peace of mind. Because I was like, okay, like I think I'll probably end up in STEM. It's stable. So that's why I picked that. I was just deciding what type of engineering to do, like bouncing between like mechanical, and like computer electrical, and ultimately decided computer because I was like, okay, I'm pretty logical. Like it's just math. Math is pretty logical. And then I also decided to, because I dropped the electrical part of my combined major, I decided to pick up a master's degree just to finish still in 5 years, but only do 2 co-ops instead of the 3 that you would typically do if you just did a bachelor's at Northeastern. But my master's is not technical at all. It's actually in engineering management. And so that's like more of like understanding business jargon. And it's kind of like the intersectionality of like engineering and business. People are getting more engineering management master's degrees now in space of what used to be like people just getting an MBA. Though I feel like MBAs are still sometimes held in higher regard just because it's traditionally always been there. Engineering management degrees are still kind of newer and not as many people have them. So they don't really understand what that is. But they're both master's degrees. One is MBAs and master's bachelor of arts, or I don't know what does A stand for?
I could not tell you. I have no idea.
MBA, yeah, degree. It's a
business administration.
I don't know why I thought arts because I was like, oh, the A stands for something. Okay, Master of Business Administration versus I have a Master's of Science in Engineering Management. I feel like it's kind of the same, right? Or in my opinion, I think it is, but I've never done an MBA, so I don't know what that entails. But I know from what I've heard that it's essentially kind of like you when people go back, people are typically working. So they come with the firsthand experience of the industry and they apply that in projects that they do in presentations. But also the main point of it is to network with other people. Like they meet a lot of people. And from there, that's where you grow your connections. And I've done that in my program, though most of us are still in school. Some people that I've met when I was doing the master's were actually working part-time too, which is pretty cool. So I did that, and I never get to flex this elsewhere too, but I also have 2 minors.
Flex it.
One in computer science and one in mathematics. That's not really applicable, but I never get to do that. So I'll say it here. And then through my co-ops, my first one was actually more electrical focused. That's when I was deciding what to do. And that's when I decided I was going to drop the electrical part of my major because I just didn't really like electronics that much, or hardware, working with hardware because it's really intricate. And circuits are kind of like magic to me. So I decided to drop that. But I wanted to focus still on the hardware aspect of it. So my second co-op, I did more embedded programming, which is like you're still working with hardware, but you're not designing the hardware. You're coding for certain specifications of already designed hardware. So you need to understand limitations of what it can or cannot do. So that's what I did. And then I think even prior to that, I was an intern at a startup my freshman year, which I got through a friend. But that was like my first introduction to even like electronics or coding at all, because I don't think I took any classes for coding really.
Oh my God, wait, is this Pavlok? I remember you were.
Yeah, so I actually worked.
Oh my God.
Which is I could go into a whole thing there too, but you could just Google it. They make
Pavlok Shark Tank.
they make wristbands that send electric zaps to you to train you to build better and healthier habits. That's my only thing that I'm going to say about it. You can look that up and you can talk about it with me at a later time. That's not what this episode is about. But currently, now I've been working for about almost 3 years. I think I hit my 3-year mark recently, working at Northrop Grumman. Or is it 3 years? I don't remember.
I'm assuming 3 because you're a year over me.
Okay, yeah. So 3 years. When I actually got the job at Northrop Grumman through a SASE conference, because I got an internship there 1 year before I graduated, and then they wanted me to come back full time. And so I was part of their rotational program, actually, which is pretty cool. And I think more companies are having that now, where they allow you to work for a certain amount of time, maybe like 1 year, I think is standard. And then you basically can move on to another role. It's like a no strings attached sort of thing. It's like, okay, it's like a kind of a co-op, but like within a full-time job, which I thought was pretty cool. And so it allowed me to also try different things within the company, because I got hired to do more software originally, but then I wanted to pivot a little bit and see what other opportunities I could get. And then my second rotation was more, I was a product owner for an agile team where we worked in like 2-week sprints. And so from that, I had to work with a lot of other product owners and customers to understand customer requirements, but also work with my development team who was doing the coding and telling them what needed to be done, what was prioritized, what feature needed to be done sooner than these other ones, and also approve or reject is a harsh word, but approve or push back some other timeline that we were trying to get through. And then my third one was a little more different also, but it was also kind of more customer interfacing, where I was working with a lot of groups on their efforts and understanding what they were doing and putting their efforts into like roadmaps and stuff, and understanding the bigger vision of maybe a 30, 60, 90-day time frame, but also like years down the line too, to understand their vision and where their progress is on certain projects that they have. Because in bigger companies, they just have really big initiatives, and sometimes you don't know where that project is in terms of status. And so understanding like, oh, like this is a 5-year project, but like where are we exactly in that? And like what are your set milestones that you've set for that sort of thing? So that was my third one. And then now I have my official out of graduation rotation role. So I am a principal project engineer, which essentially means
dang, those are those high titles over there.
So I did get promoted as well more recently. I think maybe it's been 4 months since I've been in this role, but basically my role is to plan and manage execution of changes to the F-35 fighter jet aircraft. So we work jointly with Lockheed Martin and JPO, which is the Joint Program Office, which is like the government for like how they do fighter planes and stuff. I'm still like, I don't know how to pitch that because I've never like had to explain my role to anyone outside the company yet, but that's my title. So we essentially like lead the execution of work by planning with schedule, getting funding, risk assessments, like typical project management type things. And so that's kind of what I do now. So it's also more customer interfacing, but also working with different interdisciplinary teams. So it's kind of like in the same vein of like customer facing things, but also managing to make sure that things are going according to plan. So it's honestly the engineering management side of my education, I suppose. It's not really computer engineering at all. I don't really do that anymore, but I think the knowledge that I gain from that does really help with understanding technical requirements and working with engineers, right? So I've shifted very far from what I studied, but not really far at all, really. you know. Like I don't code anymore, but I think the logic and the experience that I've had from coding helps for me to understand estimates, how reasonable some request is based
Hmm.
on what I understand and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Nice.
Very long spiel, but I don't think I ever like outlined the whole progression of I think either of us our whole like careers. And that's like a shortened version, a TLDR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, like we've been working together for so long, and I know you work at Northrop, and I know you've been there, but I definitely didn't really know the details of what you did. So,
Hmm. I mean, I didn't know what you really did either. I just knew like, oh, traffic stuff. Because I know you would sometimes have to go to a site or something, right? Like you would have to
Mhm.
go, and I was like, what is he doing? Like I didn't understand, and I still don't really like fully understand the extent to like what that work is and is doing, I guess. But
Mhm.
you know, that's just like kind of the differences of if we're not in that field, it's just hard to understand, right?
Yeah, I think both of us could probably go into a whole episode of just like our industry and
Yeah.
what we think of it, and like what is the actual big picture outcomes of our work, and like how you may see it as like a regular person, or how you could connect to that world.
Right.
And I feel like that just takes a lot. But yeah, I don't know. Field work, like just like quickly though, like field work is kind of fun, as I think a lot of civil engineering companies, whether you do structural or you do environmental or like me, like transportation,
Hmm.
it's kind of a nice break to have to like not be in the office and go out to the field, which is basically just like the area that your project's in, and just get to do stuff on your feet, even if it's just like observation stuff. So, for example, we had this project, this like corridor project, and there was a bunch of signals in there. So it was like kind of seeing how those signals operated and seeing how cars got through that area. So it was just me and my coworker just standing there looking at how bad the intersection was functioning, writing down some notes. And it's not anything like, not like building stuff, not like
Yeah.
getting my feet wet kind of thing, but it's still nice to get that break. I also think it's a really cool opportunity to like get to know some coworkers better. You drive out for an hour, you're out in the field, you get lunch with them. So it's a nice break from just staring at your desk and being your
Yeah.
mouse or keyboard.
Agreed.
Yeah. No, I think like with your rotations, I think I've said this a few times too, where I think it's really cool that you could start that outside of college, because like I think internships are the only other spot that you really have like short term segments of your career like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And you could really just, maybe this is me projecting, but like throw yourself into those fields for like that amount of time and really get the most out of it, and
Hmm.
feel like you're like kind of pressured by time to seek out all those connections, seek out all those different areas in that job to like see and
Hmm.
have a better understanding of it all and know where to go from there. But I
Yeah.
think like other jobs, it's like really hard to shift or move to different teams, just because I think on the job side, it's like it's hard to justify that you spending for me like 2 years on one team and being like, okay, let's just ditch all that experience and go do something else and
Right.
probably get paid similarly. Like that's kind of a hard sell on the company end.
And I think, well, I think companies now also realize that people do jump around more and want to expand those opportunities to people. And so I don't know what it's like at other companies, but I know in aerospace industry, people do jump around to different roles, like even within the company, just because there's so much to offer. And so Northrop does say that they pride themselves on making sure that they find the right fit for you. So they want to make sure that you are doing what you enjoy, or at least somewhat enjoy, I guess. As long as you
Mm,
don't hate it, right? It's there's just so many there's so many opportunities. So you don't have to go to a different place. You can just stay in the company. That also
mm,
makes it easier for just paperwork in general, for retirement and stuff for now. Not to say that I would stay at the company, but it's pretty easy to just stay, but also just do so many different things. And even without the rotational programs, I think they're pretty willing to do so. But then there's also discussion of teams that do have higher turnover rates and stuff. But I think that's like a different thing versus like the ability to be able to jump around and people being okay with that versus people leaving because of unhappiness, right? So
mm.
there's a difference between the two.
Do you know any higher ups, people like, I don't know, VP roles, or
Mm.
I don't know, any type of like high leadership role who navigated to those spots and also switched around past, let's say, the rotation. So like they changed like teams.
Mm. Yeah, I think of what I've seen from just like hearing people talk at whether it's conferences or our company also does through our employee resource groups have exec like where they bring in exec for panels and stuff. So we learn more about their trajectories. And actually I hosted one recently with an executive and he was sharing basically his full professional history as well. And I think what you see from a lot of people's experiences, especially those higher ups, is that it's also very not linear. Like they're in a role. I think they started technical and then they went to like recruiting like more like interns and like that sort of thing. And then they went back to doing some technical stuff. And then it depends on like kind of what they were. And someone asked an interesting question of like when they thought they were ready to like do managerial stuff versus like staying technical. Cause I think that's always like a question that comes up. People are like, oh, did you always know that you wanted to do manager stuff or were you going to stay technical? And I think that he answered and he said that it wasn't necessarily that he wanted to do that. It just like as you get more responsibility and you move up in the ranks, it kind of just comes with it, right? Even when you're a technical lead, you're still doing technical stuff, but you're still in charge of people, whether you want to or not. So that's kind of already managerial responsibilities. And so it was a natural shift that people will just go through in their careers where you're going to be leading people either way. And so a manager role is sometimes like those roles need to be filled too. So you need to be able to lead a team. But if you want to stay technical, you still need to be able to talk to people and work with other people, right? So it's kind of like not super like black and white as you would think it is in terms of that. And so people's trajectories also is kind of based on what opportunities came by and also what they were interested in or what programs or just like the ones that they wanted to do. But yeah, I don't know if you've talked to or if you've heard more seasoned people talk about that or what you've heard that's different or the same. But that's kind of like what I've heard from my experience so far.
Yeah. I don't think I could kind of pinpoint to higher management about kind of their trajectory. I think a lot of them have that feeling of not expecting to get into managerial positions though.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that like I find really interesting is that on the lower engineering level, like when I talk to other people, it doesn't feel like a lot of people particularly seek that, or one concern that people has is always like actually a question that we've asked like a lot to people who end up being in managerial position is like, do you like miss that part of your job, right? Do you miss the thing that excited you or like started this passion for like wanting to pursue this career?
Yeah.
And now you're doing like very admin stuff that in my opinion kind of feels like something that you could do in like a lot of different types of industries. And I guess the end result is still like part of your industry, but like the day-to-day part of like managing skills or managing people is kind of like similar across the board, which I think is interesting.
I think
Um,
yeah. I was gonna say I think like the perception of manager is also like very traditional in people's minds where it's like, oh, you just like lead a team. But honestly, it's very sectionalized with the responsibilities. Like, yes, you're responsible to do team things, like you maybe hire them, you do like year-end reviews and stuff like that, you have your one-on-ones, but you also are directing the vision for whatever project or long-term vision of your team, right? And what they do. So it's kind of like just bigger picture items. You might not necessarily do like the day-to-day things that you used to, but I think it's more of like understanding how each piece of what your team is doing plays into like the overall picture, right? So I think that that's kind of like the difference in that like typical managerial admin stuff because you will have to do that regardless, but it's also I think more rewarding for some to be able to do that.
well, it's kind of cool that you're so your title is technically
That's
principal project
project
engineer.
engineer. Yeah. Principal
Okay.
is just like now I'm a level 3 instead of a level 2. But
Uh,
project engineer is my title. Yeah.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so like would your is the next title that would be
So I
the
think after
continuation?
this, I think companies do it differently. You could go to a level 4 or you could do the manager route, which is not like there's like 2 levels for managers or 3 level for managers. So you kind of like start
Hmm.
over a little bit, like manager 1, 2, and 3. Um,
Okay.
yeah. And then the
So
higher
you're.
level is like after that, maybe VP or director.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. But you're close to that point now. Like you're
I'm
talking
closer
about
than
like.
yeah. So I could make a jump to like manage a smaller team if I like keep growing right now. But I don't know at what point, like I'm still really new to like this level. So I don't foresee it like happening anytime soon. But
Hmm.
I'm learning a lot about in my new role and stuff like that. So we'll see. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, I think this topic as a whole is so large, and like I said, just talking about our personal experiences could probably go on for episodes. But a couple just like questions that I thought would be unique for the episode is when you were in college, what was your biggest question to someone who is maybe more experienced in the field on just general networking or professionalism or career fairs? What was something that you were concerned about that you had questions for?
Like you're saying if I was a freshman, I was talking to someone that's like higher, what would
Like
I?
if you were, yeah, in college and you were
Mhm.
talking to someone who maybe has been working for a few years and you wanted to ask them about something that you were concerned about or needed advice on. Did you have a question like that? And also, was it answered? Slash, like, what was that answer?
Yeah, let me think. I think the main questions when I was younger in career fairs was just understanding like what jobs require, like what the job consisted of. I don't think I understood fully like what a day to day could be or full responsibilities of a job. I don't know if that makes sense. Like I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, I think because my main goal has always been focused on just like securing a job. But I'm like, what actually happens? Like I don't understand what people did. They go to work for like 8 hours a day. What do you do? What do you like for those 8 hours, because like I would understand for like for general labor jobs if I worked at a store or restaurant, right? Like I'm always running around like serving people and that sort of thing. I guess I never understood how companies were structured and how the work was flowed down or like what type of work you would be doing on a day-to-day basis. Is it always just the same? I would always picture, business people just like going in for 8 hours a day, going to Excel, doing something with numbers, and then that's their day, right? I didn't
Just
understand.
clacking away at their
No,
keyboard and like,
exactly. I didn't
okay,
understand
good, I'm
like
done.
what they were doing. Yeah. What I think that was my main thing. The concept of a corporate job was just so new to me and I didn't know, you know,
Hmm.
what that was. So
Right.
that was me. What about you?
I think I always had questions about just navigating career fairs and
Mm.
keeping connections up. I actually, our last guest or 2 guests ago, Joe, I
Uh-huh.
reached out to him because I just know that he is very experienced in the field of just networking, and he talked about his experiences of just going up to these high level leaders and trying to like sell scholarship, but also himself. And I wanted to know more so how to keep those connections pass after the career fair because I think that was always
Ooh.
a concern of mine. It was like, okay, I could make a connection there.
Yeah.
Now, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Especially if like I wasn't looking for a job specifically, but if I just like wanted to expand my network and also keep that network
Open.
thinking of me too, I
Yeah.
guess.
What was the
And
answer?
he just one of the things was just not feeling afraid to message them when those people like came into your mind. So if like something random reminded you of them, you could kind of bring it up, have another conversation, even through LinkedIn, just to keep that conversation going, just so they can remember you. And maybe that could kind of stem into like a conversation about how they're feeling about work or like what's over there. It doesn't necessarily have to be in that direction, but like
Mhm.
the more interactions that you have, that could get there.
Okay.
And another small thing that he mentioned was on LinkedIn, where it's like, oh, like say congratulations to these people or say happy birthday. And it's just like a nice little reminder that you're thinking of them and kind of they pop up in your mind. And maybe if they're going through like a hiring part, they're like, oh, yeah, like I remember talking to Jason Shin about X, Y, and Z at that career fair. And
Hmm.
because he reached out now, I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe I'll look at his profile. Kind of small stuff like that to keep that like connection kind of fresh.
Yeah. I like that. Mm.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Okay, another quick question. Can you talk about a failing or funny professional story about like maybe like at a career fair or like at an interview or something like that?
I've never failed. What do you mean?
You're too
Okay.
perfect, Jenny.
Well, well, I guess like I could talk about. well, the first time I tabled for Northrop, it was actually at FIS regional conference for the West region, and I actually had to moderate a panel too for Northrop, and I had no idea what I was doing. Even when I was looking at resumes, I was like, I literally just graduated college 1 year ago, less than 1 year ago. And I'm looking at resumes of these people that have some of them like way more experience than me. I was like, okay. And, and they're so like gun ho and ready for like the corporate world or like just working. And I was like, okay, I was like that too. And when I was going to career fairs and stuff like that. But it was just so it was kind of overwhelming in that sense. I was like, oh shoot. Now I have to like look at their resume and see if they one have the experience to like work at the company or enough interest for us to look at their resume, right? Though I wasn't like filtering it out, but evaluating them in a way by just like what they were telling, asking me and that sort of thing. And I don't know if I did like a good enough job because I was like, I don't know what exactly I was looking for. I was kind of just there to try to help people or help the students, right? Or even when I was moderating, I was like, I was moderating a panel. They were all very experienced people, but I still didn't know what exactly they did because their titles are just like they're high up, they do all these things. And if you're not in the industry, like it's like, oh, they're in the industry, they just know things. I don't know anything. So I think like that experience was kind of like it was kind of humbling. Yeah, it was like, oh, like yeah, I'm working, but like clearly still a very different level than the other people that have been working for a long time. And it's a
Right.
transition to get there. Yeah, I make big boy money now. Like I make more money than I have ever seen in my life or ever thought I could see. Right. Like I don't think I've never imagined that. But it's not like oh I make so much money. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying like I never thought that I would get to this point in my career or thought of what would have been like to be like a real adult, you know.
Mhm.
But obviously there's still different stages and just figuring that out, but also being like on the other side of it, even though I just was on the other side of that. I don't know what my point was, but you know, it was just like an eye-opening experience to being like, okay, the only thing that really changed for me was like my title. It's not like, oh, one day I just got a job and then like suddenly I'm like different, you know, like
Yeah.
it's still like, oh yeah, I still feel like a student. I'm just working, I'm doing the same thing as I would have done in a co-op, really, but it's considered a full-time job, right? Because I'm gonna be there indefinitely until I move to another
Mm.
job. So I think that's kind of like my take on that. I don't really have a funny failing story at the moment, but I guess it could always come up later.
There's
I
plenty of time to fail
don't know. Did
the
you
rest
have
of your
anything?
career.
Do you have any?
Um, yeah, I have two, but I'll just say I'll say one, I guess. I
Okay.
think it was my first co-op interview. I did not know much about the company. I
Hmm.
showed up, I was pretty nervous, but I also did not prepare as much as I probably could have. I remember there was kind of like a cheat sheet for my co-op class on what to think about during your interviews and what type of stories and like how you want to describe yourself.
Hmm.
And I think I had all those questions kind of down, but I didn't like think of it as like a conversation. It was more so, okay, you're gonna ask me this question. I'm gonna have this prepared answer. I'm gonna give this to you, whatever. And what is like kind of like a very normal and like casual question that they asked me was, what was the last book that you read? And I like literally
Wow.
like paused for like 10 seconds. It was like my second year, and I was like, I probably have not read a book. Read in Jesus Christ. Yeah, of course I don't read. I probably have not read a book since like maybe senior year, and I barely read books because like I didn't care that much about my English classes during senior year.
Yeah.
And on the spot, I was like, "Holy crap! What are they going to think? Whatever." And I stumbled across. Oh, I think I like reread or I reread some of the Harry Potter books, and it was a nice casual book to read, and like I think they asked a follow-up question. And I was like, "Oh God!" Like I haven't read this book in so long. Like that's not their last book I read, but the
Yeah.
only thing I could think of. And I was one, I didn't get the job. Like, but two, it just like it just got me in the mindset of it's not so professional at these interviews, and like you have to be ready to just have a conversation with these people. Like that's such a normal question to ask just a person that you might meet or like whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's also like kind of a reflection of like what you do outside of work,
True.
whether you
Oh,
try
yeah.
to keep up with stuff. I thought it was a good question, but like in the moment, I was like, "Holy crap, I'm sucking at this interview right
Yeah.
now!" Like and like we continued on. I was like in my, I think for me too, it's one of those things where I just like think about those moments like a lot during it, and maybe I like lose focus throughout the rest of the
Mm,
interview. I'm like, "Wow, that was like a really silly answer for me to give, and I was not prepared."
I
But
see.
they're asking me other stuff, and like
Yeah.
hard to recover from that. But
That's
yeah.
true. You know, one interview question that I was asked recently was, it was kind of at the end too, and my interviewer kind of just asked it. She was like, "Oh, like outside of work, do you have any side projects, or like what else do you do?" And well, I brought up the podcast because it was,
Wow.
but I was thinking, I was like, "Oh, if I didn't have that, what would I have said?" Right? And I don't know. I would have drawn a blank.
Mm.
Honestly, like I don't really have. I'll be like, okay, like I could volunteer. I volunteer for SASE, but I think everything is SASE involved. That would have been my answer. So it just goes to show, like, I guess how much it's embedded in my life.
hmm Yeah. On the flip side, though, you could say if you didn't do SACE, maybe you just have like an abundance of time to do as many side projects as you'd want.
That's true. That's true. When I don't know. The question is like what I have been doing. Well, I don't know. I do like doing creative things in general, but
I'm like, you could say I'm trying to be a social media influencer on the platforms
I feel
of
like
TikTok.
I feel like when people hear that someone's trying to be an influencer, it like paints a certain image of you that you're very, you have to be a certain type of person to want to be an influencer. I feel like most people just become one out of just like if they go viral from the content they're posting. It's not like anyone was aiming to be. I don't know. Actually, I don't know now. I think people are aiming to be influencers now versus where in the past it kind of just happened for them. So when I hear that now, especially living in LA, I don't know. It kind of like you have to be a certain type of person, like very into yourself. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's like a very narcissistic way. It's like, yeah, I don't know. But I feel like if I ever said that in an interview, people will be like, oh, she's very, she's, I don't know. It depends also what kind of content you're making, right? If you're just making
hmm
like thirst traps or like lip sync videos, it's very different than like if you were making content to like try to like educate people on like a very niche topic that you're really passionate about or want to bring more awareness to, right? So
Yeah,
influencer is also there's a lot of variety to what an influencer could be.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Damn. Do you think you would, how you just said like if someone at a party was like talking about like being an influencer and you
Yeah.
have that mindset,
Uh-huh.
do you think that's like flipped for one, would you talk about the podcast if you like met someone? And two, like what do you think their opinions of if you were like, yeah, I do a podcast, like, or I'm trying to grow a podcast, Because like I feel like that's also getting like popular
Yeah.
and
But there's so many different types of podcasts. There's the ones where like I think of so many bloomed in quarantine where people just sit around in a room and they just like talk about anything. But like
mm,
mostly I feel like either about dating or I think mostly I see a lot of them about dating and stuff like that on my TikTok feed. Or maybe that's just me. Where they just like talk about that. And
you
it's
just
kind of like
revealed your feed.
but it's also like
Everyone's gonna know about you, Jenny.
no, but it's like the same type of content over and over again, especially with the demographic that's appealing to like people in their early 20s. I think like I never really bring up that I have a podcast unless we're talking about podcasts specifically and someone brings it up for me. I don't think I would like purposely make the effort to be like, oh, like to insert myself in a conversation and be like, oh, by the way, I have a podcast. Like I will never bring it up like that because that's just so I feel like it's so egotistical in a way. But I
Yeah,
do want people to listen to, but like only if it falls within stuff they would listen to normally or want to hear about, or if they're interested in.
yeah.
Like, would
No, I
you
get
bring it
that.
up? You'd be like, "Hey, I have a podcast. Listen to it." It's like that's the equivalent of you walking around and handing out your mixtape. Like, hey, listen to my fire mixtape, bro.
Oh God. But the thing is, we did that at SACE
Okay, but
National
it's different
Convention.
because the environment is specifically for that demographic that we
Yeah,
are
yeah.
targeting, and so it's not like it's the professional way of being like, hey, listen to my mixtape, but it's different because it's like we interview people in the community, right? So
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't. I don't know, but it's also like there's it's a case by case basis. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But I agree. I'm not like trying to be outward about it, and maybe that's like I do think about that sometimes when I watch shows like Shark Tank or something, and they're like, "Oh, like I was grinding, like I was working every day, I was like going door to door, like doing this and this," and I'm like, I guess that is a way that you could try to advertise something that's like a
Yeah,
personal project, but also I enjoy this, but I'm not like, "Oh, this is like groundbreaking, like you need to watch this, like
for
everyone needs to
sure.
listen to it. If you want to enjoy it, you have fun like listening to it, or you find it educational, like that's cool." But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm not trying to like
I'm not gonna
tell every single person. Like,
I'm not gonna
I don't think
crank
many
it
people at
out.
work know that I do this. It's not
Mm,
something that I like talk about
advert.
it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think only my one coworker has brought it up to me because like she saw that it was on my Instagram.
Mm,
Uh, yeah, so I
yeah,
was like, okay,
yeah.
I
Yeah,
put it out there. So
right. It's there if they
yeah,
want to find it, but it's not like you're walking advertisement for it.
yeah, yeah. It's not like we were holding up a poster like talking about the podcast and
Yeah,
asking random people about it. Like that'd be really something.
hmm for sure.
um.
Ooh, I did want to go
Okay.
into really quickly. I guess we have. Well, I guess the last thing, you
Yeah.
know, about like corporate red flags.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made a short list of ones I just thought of. Um,
Just go through them. I want to like
okay, so whenever I hear there's like certain words, if I hear them, I'm like questionable because it might mean something else. So when I hear that you have to be able to thrive in a fast-paced environment, that one means to me that either people are leaving the team so fast that it's so fast-paced, one, or they're just assigning you so much work, or they just don't have a standardized structure, and so everything is like messy. And I think most Gen Z people, when they hear that term now, it's like, no, that just means it's unstable when it's fast-paced like that. Or when someone says that they're like the team is like family, it's too much. It's kind of suffocating, if not. I don't think that any
mm,
more culture should be like that. That just means that there's no clear boundaries defined by the team, whether that be working too much if they're not paid for overtime, or just like they're expected to just, if someone like is not nice, I don't know how else to say it. If they're not like good people, you're supposed to just like ignore it and not like necessarily report it. Oh, we're just family. This is how we talk to each other, right? Stuff like that. If a company doesn't have a good diversity inclusion, don't use inclusive language or going into the diversity inclusion thing if they don't have people of color in major leadership, upper management, right? I think that's like kind of weird. Or if they're preaching quote unquote company culture, but not necessarily defining what company culture is. I think those are vague terms. And then going into like if you're working at a company, if your manager doesn't make the effort to make one-on-ones with you on even the bare minimum, I think is a monthly basis, then I think that's kind of hard. If it's even hard to get time on their calendar to get a one-on-one, I think that's like kind of a red flag also. And if the
mm,
one-on-one is only just status meeting and the manager doesn't necessarily ask you about your development and goals that you have projected, because they're supposed to aid you in building your career, not necessarily just working on the team that you're working on now. I think that's what makes or breaks a good manager. I wouldn't call it a super red flag, but I think the red flag is that if they don't even make time to talk to you at all, right?
yeah.
And then high turnover rate for whatever reason. People are just seem to be leaving. And then I put mandating going back into the office just because why? I feel like work now you can do remote. If you're doing the same work that you could just do at home, what's the point? They're trying to bring you in for some other reason. They can say that it's for team building, but I think they should be adaptable. Companies should adapt to the world that we live in now, the current climate, and understand that people do not or not as productive just in one space like that anymore. And
Yeah.
they can be, and it's been proven that they can be productive elsewhere and in different working environments. So why go back to the traditional way when things aren't ever the same? That's my quick
Yeah.
list that I really briefly wrote down before before we started recording this episode.
That's a good list
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
That's
I think I'm also on corporate TikTok as well, where it's like people are
mm,
just meaning about like working from home and stuff like that. But in all honesty, it's kind of like what it is, the environment now.
yeah. I think it's like kind of silly, the whole work from home stuff.
Hmm.
I think on one end, on a people perspective, it's just that's just the direction that like people want to go. People are happier when they have flexibility, when they're able to take care of things at home. And I think like even on a company level, you see benefits from it. It's not even like just a neutral thing. Like it's not like, oh, it's like the same here or here. You get actual benefits from people actually enjoying their lives and like getting time back to take care of other things. I, on a very corporate side, I'm like, I work more when I like work from home because I don't mind working extra hours. Like if I know I have to make dinner or something, like I could stay logged on, make something real quick and like go back on. Versus like if I was in the office, like I'd have to make a whole plan to like figure something out. It's
Yeah.
just so much easier to continue doing something like that. And then also just like the general idea of it, of mandating something, going back to the office full time is very limiting, or it's like limiting your talent pool too. High talent also wants to have this too. So if you're gonna say that, then like
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like people
But
want to be elsewhere. Like they don't want to be tied to a location that might be nowhere that they want to be. Like they want to be in a city. They don't want to be like tied to like, oh, I gotta go into the town, like a really small town and like go to the office for what? Yeah.
yeah, or also for me, like being on like vacation or something, it just makes me feel a lot better that I could go home and like spend more time with my family because I
Hmm.
don't live near my hometown
Yeah,
and not feel bad about it. And like
for sure.
having that flexibility like should be so normal. I don't know.
Agreed.
Hopefully there's a shift later on. In terms of my red flags, I feel like I kind of have very similar things that you mentioned. I
Mhm.
think when I originally wrote down red flags, I was thinking of if you were on the recruiting side. So like if I was like
Oh,
no, like it's cool because like I think now like we can address both sides, right? Like you
yeah.
have like what you've seen in your company. To be honest, I don't think I've like really seen as many red flags like at my company, which is like a really good thing, right? Like I feel really good that like I don't really have any major complaints on like a general company level or like general team.
Yeah.
But like when I think of like red flags for people who are like going to resume reviews or like if you see them at a networking event, when people start talking about their experience and like they don't feel confident or like they like are kind of like trying to sell themselves short, I feel like that's kind of like
Oh,
a little red flag, but I also understand from that side too. I'm
yes.
like I understand that like you're struggling to get your point across and like
Yeah.
also that's something that like we've seen common in the Asian community of not being super confident or not kind of like selling yourself in a way, your best abilities. So I think that's kind of like a red flag. Obviously, like typos in resumes is like a big
Yeah.
red flag. And I like don't care that much about like dressing super like professionally or anything, but I feel kind of weird when I see someone go to a professional event. Like it's clearly like you're supposed to dress a certain way and they like didn't put energy into it. I don't care if like you have a fancy suit, but if you didn't put like energy into it yourself, I feel like that's like already saying you're not being thoughtful about the experience. But in a work environment, I wish like we could wear whatever the fuck we wanted to wear. That'd be incredible. Like wearing sweatpants to work, like that's cool. But like when you're going to an event that like you're trying to like network and it's like obviously like the status quo or like the general attire is like business casual or business professional and you don't put effort into it, I don't know. I think that's a red flag for me.
I got you. Yeah. I think of ones too that I would think of, but I think you mentioned the one point about people not knowing how to basically pitch themselves or like vouch for themselves, I guess, in a way. That's like a main theme.
Hmm.
But it also comes with time, I feel like. And I kind of empathize with that for like early career people, but it's something that we definitely should work on more for sure. Yeah.
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 Cool. I know this is going long.
I know.
Um,
This is a longer episode, but it's the first one back. So
yeah. But Jenny, I have a game for you that we did not discuss at all before the episode,
right.
and I think it'll be fun. I've seen a lot of TikToks about this. It's like very relevant in like sports. So this game, the way that the rules work is that we'll go back and forth on ideas that we wish we'd known earlier in our career or a piece of advice that we got or like we have learned from our personal experience. And the reason why we're doing this as a draft is because I think a lot of people through their careers have similar pieces of advice that they want to give out, but kind of want to do a mix of ranking plus like making sure that we come up with a few ideas here.
Okay.
So, do you want to have the first pick or do you want me to have the first pick?
I can say someone,
Okay.
okay, which is to find a mentor. And
Mm,
that could be related to, you can find multiple mentors in different aspects of your life. So it doesn't have to be one person is like the go-to for everything. You can have mentors in your personal life and your professional life, right? And even in professional, you can have mentors in the specific career path that you are maybe interested in versus the one that you're in now, right? Like you can be aiming for something higher or like a different field completely. That's still considered a mentor, I think.
hmm Nice. That's a good
Mm.
first draft pick. I think that's like definitely top things that like people talk about like in
Yes.
like panels and stuff, but it's like also just like super valid.
Yeah.
Okay, mine is to over prepare for things.
Ooh.
Whether it's like your interview, whether it's just networking, going to a career fair and preparing yourself to know about the company, to have certain topics in mind to talk about, to have an idea of like where you think like the flow of the conversation can go. Like obviously you're not trying to follow a script and feel robotic, but just having a lot of those ideas in mind,
Yeah.
at least for me, has made me feel so much more comfortable
Yeah.
in any professional aspect. I think it also applies to like doing presentations or even going to like a meeting for like a project catch up, just like preparing your thoughts and feeling prepared. And I think that comes off really strongly when you go to a meeting. People know that you're prepared. People know that you've looked at these, for me, plans or like this document before, and you know exactly what questions that you need to ask, and you're not wasting their time.
Right.
So over prepare is mine.
Pretty good one. Yeah. Okay, next one I think is learn how to pitch yourself. Or I guess what falls into that is learn how to brand yourself.
Mm,
Um, because that's ultimately what will make you distinct from other candidates.
mm, okay.
Branding could mean just like how you are as a person, your skills. It could also mean your skills, whether you have a niche interest, or it could just mean certain work ethic things that you might have that will put you above other people, I guess. Right?
hmm
Yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My next thing will be to hmm, bring your like personality to like your company. Kind of the same thing like we were talking about before of
Yeah.
like you adding value to the company culture.
Mm-hmm.
I think from my experience of like seeing other coworkers, I think the people that have stood out to me the most are the people who felt like genuine in their personality and didn't try to like just fit in, but like wanted to do their own thing and like try to bring up certain things and try to change what is typical at the company and try to include other people too. So I thought that was like really cool in seeing. And I think the more people do that, the more comfortable people would be at like their company or their job or in their position.
Okay.
All right, we do maybe one more pick
One
each.
more.
Do you
I
have
think
do you have something
yeah,
for
I
one
have a
more?
few
I'm trying to
more.
struggling too right
I
now.
I have
So
a few more. Well, one
okay.
is maintain work-life balance. I think
Oh,
it's
damn
also
it. That was
very,
gonna be
very, is that
mine.
yours? It's very easy to overwork, especially in a virtual environment, but it's also super, super important to set boundaries with work too. You're like, I'm dedicating work to this time. I'm only gonna do work during this time. If someone calls me outside, that could just be addressed next time. Unless it's like super, super, super emergency. I've already said that I'm not going to do this after work hours. You cannot make me setting those boundaries, right, is super important with work.
Dang.
Is that yours?
That was a good one because it's just so important. Like,
Yeah.
ah,
I got another
work-life balance. Like, that is my biggest concern for any person that I hear of who is
one.
like further along in their career. And like,
Yeah.
that's definitely shown through in our episodes where both of
Yeah.
us are curious about that because like, it's really scary to think about, okay, my natural progression is like to move up in my career, but somehow I'm going to lose more of my life
Yeah.
because I'm doing better at my job. Like that's such a weird concept that the only way going up is to basically like lose the other things that you like. And from my perspective, it feels like as you grow up, you're going to have more things in your life that you need to take care of. Let's
True.
say like very down the road, you have maybe a family, a house. Like those are outside things that I'm not technically taking care of right now. I'm gonna have more of that responsibility, and then I'm also gonna have less time because I'm moving
Yeah.
up in my career. Like,
Yeah. That is
so,
that's a pretty common theme. It seems like people take less and less vacations as they get older.
oh God, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I think my last thing, maybe it's not like necessarily advice because maybe different companies are different, but something that I learned is that my days go by faster when I am more casual and talk to people in the office. I used to always think that as a co-op, I was like, oh, well, first off, who wants to talk to me as a co-op? Like, you're
Mm.
busy, you're doing stuff, you don't want to like step away from your work or whatever. But also, it's like one, getting to know your coworkers better, but two, like it's a nice break to have. And most people, I'd say sometimes obviously it's busy, but most people like are okay to step away from their desk to talk for like 5 minutes. That's not that long
Mhm.
in like the grand scheme of things. So like don't feel nervous to just like approach people to talk to them. I think that was like my biggest shift in mentality at work. I would never try to do that in my first two co-ops, like ever. If someone approached me or if I was working with someone, I would start that conversation and I could do that. But like I was really bad about talking to people maybe that I didn't work with because I was just like so nervous of how it came across or how they might think I'm not like a hard worker because I want to have like a conversation. No, like you could still work hard, but like people genuinely need breaks throughout their day. Like no one's working 8 hours
Yeah, there's no way.
fully at their desk
Yeah.
being productive the entire time. They need to get out for water. They need to get whatever. Like that's a good break to have
Hmm.
and makes for me makes the days like a lot better.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty good list.
All right. Cool. I like this.
Yeah, so this is kind of the we'll wrap up the episode. I know we covered a lot of different topics today regarding our professional careers, general advice that we have, and kind of like what we've learned through our time switching or transitioning from being a college student to being now a working professional. So I hope that this was helpful in any way. We kind of just like talked about a variety of topics. And if you wanted to hear us expand on any certain part of it, we would be glad to do so in any future episodes. We kind of just testing this format out and seeing if people would actually enjoy listening to it or take anything away from it. So, yeah, let us know.
Yeah, for sure. I think like yeah, and wrapping this up, it's kind of cool to see like both of us are very much like scratching the surface of our professional career. 2 for me, 3 years for you.
Mm-hmm.
But when I think about it in comparison to like how I felt as a freshman, there's been like so much growth and so much stuff that like we learned that
Yeah.
may seem like common sense nowadays, but it's like something that took time to learn or was like an adjustment period. So I think it was nice to reflect on those ideas, learn a little more about that stuff, and kind of just pass on some lessons that we had.
For
So
sure.
thought this was a fun episode. And for everyone, don't forget to subscribe so you know when episodes come out. And you can follow us on our Instagram at the Adult Table Podcast for updates. I'm Jason Chin.
And I'm Jenny Chung, and we'll see you next time at the adult table. Thanks for listening.